Hello everyone, this is lecture 7 and we're going to talk about GDAL and OGR, or Gdal and Ogr as it's pronounced. And I talked about these softwares in the first couple weeks. So if you recall, Gdal and Ogr refer to the combined projects that have both raster and vector tools. So Gdal or GDAL is tools for manipulating raster data, and Ogr or OGR are tools for manipulating vector data. These were all originated by this gentleman, Frank Warmerdam, and he started both projects. GDAL is an acronym that stands for the Geospatial Data Abstraction Library, and OGR is the OpenGIS Simple Features Reference. So they were started in 1998, so it's tools that have been around for quite a while. And originally Frank Warmerdam was the sole developer. It's now a project under OSGeo's umbrella, and it has over 20 contributing developers. And this gentleman, Evan Rui, is now the main developer. So what kinds of data? GDAL's superpower is that it can read or write pretty much any spatial file you throw at it. So as of today, GDAL can translate 155 raster formats and 95 vector formats. And as such, it's a workhorse for a lot of GISs. You can go to the URL at the bottom of this page to see the full list, but this is a pretty complete list of geospatial desktop software and web software. You'll see a lot of things that you recognize in here. GrassGIS, GeoServer, Idrisi, MapServer, QGIS, SagaGIS, Esri, Google Earth. So it is under the hood for a lot of GIS software. So along with that, Gdal and Ogr come with command line utilities. These are available if you go to the Start menu in the lab, for example, and you go to OSGeo for Windows, you'll find the OSGeo for Windows shell. And this is a pre-configured command line window that allows you to access all the tools I'm about to introduce you to. There's also a suite of software, FW Tools, which is short for Frank Warmerdam Tools, that you can get from this URL. And again, it's just a packaging of Gdal and Ogr with a command line utility for them. Because this is used by so many GISs, it has a pretty impressive list of corporate sponsors. And in fact, one of the issues that people were realizing recently is that there's a lot of these libraries like Gdal and Ogr and Proj4 that have a lot of power and are used for a lot of the work we do in the open source geospatial world, but don't always get the same attention in terms of funding as, say, the QGIS project does. So there was a concerted effort this summer to raise a bunch of funds for all of these libraries. So you can go to gdalbarn.com and read about that if you'd like. OGR has, again, this is the library for manipulating vector data, and it comes with these command line utilities, which are tools that you can use in a command line environment or a programmatic environment to do things to vector data. So OGR info is a command that you can type in against a shapefile, for example, to get information about that shapefile, the geometry, the projection, the number of features. And so, for example, when you open up layer properties for a layer in QGIS and you go to the information tab, that's basically using the output of OGR info. OGR to OGR converts between two different spatial formats, and there are others like OGR merge that merges spatial data sets together. And again, you can see the list of all the spatial formats that OGR works with. And again, this is the list that you're able to work with in QGIS because it has OGR under the hood. So that's how it's able to read Esri file geodatabases, Esri shapefiles, GeoJSON, etc., KML. So now that you've gotten to work with the software a little bit, you're going to start recognizing how OGR fits into the QGIS ecosystem a little bit better. Gdal, on the other hand, is the raster equivalent. And I have to change this. It's now 155 raster formats supported, and all the common ones that you're used to and more. So ArcInfo grids, GeoJPEGs, GeoTIFFs, IMGs, etc. It will read all of those. And Gdal also comes with command line utilities. So these are some of the utilities that are out there. There's just like there's OGR info, there's GDAL info that reports information about a raster file. GDAL translate lets you basically convert a raster to a different format and change the coordinate system along the way. Gdal Ogr gives you basically lets you build pyramid files for raster data. Gdal Warp is specifically for reprojection, and it goes on and on. There's some specifically for DEMs like Gdal Contour that lets you generate contours, and Gdal DEM that lets you do other things to DEMs. And it goes on and on. There's lots of these utilities for GDAL. So these are often used programmatically. So you can set up, for example, batch geoprocessing scripts that take advantage of these utilities and use them in a programmatic sense. So if you have a bunch of data to process, you can set up a Python script or a batch script to process all of that data by these Gdal OGR utilities. They also do a lot of the processing under the hood for web mapping applications. So ArcGIS, for example, when you go to download a data set from ArcGIS and you want it in a different format, it's using OGR to OGR programmatically to make that data available to you in the format that you want. It's also used for scripting large workflows. So whenever you have a bunch of big data sets or a whole series of files that you need to do something to, these utilities can be really useful. So again, they're available through the standalone install FW tools. There's also OSGeo for Windows and the command prompt that comes with that. They're available and used by QGIS and GRASS and most open source GISs. So for example, if you open up QGIS and you find the translate tool from the raster menu, this tool is a GUI version of the Gdal translate utility. And in fact, you'll see the command line equivalent of what you're using for this tool displayed down below. So this can be a great way to introduce you to some of the command line syntax for tools. Some of the tools in QGIS are based on OGR or Gdal. So there's a lot of support and help available for Gdal and OGR. You can go to the Gdal.org webpage and find lots of documentation, tutorials, listservs, just like you get with QGIS. It's going to have, especially since it's a project of OSGeo, it's going to have a lot of the same support available that you'd get with QGIS, and that's kind of the framework that OSGeo provides when it incubates open source projects. It makes sure that all of this kind of support is available and in a format that's kind of consistent with other projects. Along with that, for these individual utilities, there's a help page for each one. So for example, you can click on Gdal to tiles.py and get some documentation for what that tool uses, what it expects for arguments in the command line environment, and usually a code snippet or two that shows examples of it being used. There's also a great book. I'll bring this in next week. This is another book from Locate Press. You looked at the PG routing book last week in class from Locate Press. This press was developed by Gary Sherman, who's the founder of the QGIS project. So he uses Locate Press to publish a lot of books on open source tools. And this Geospatial Power Tools by Tyler Mitchell is a book just on using Gdal and Ogr command line utilities. So it's a fantastic resource for that. And these haven't changed a lot through the years, so this book will be relevant for quite a while. So next week, we're going to do a review in class for the midterm, which will be the following week. And after we do that review, we're going to do an in-class Gdal Ogr exercise. So you can see what it's like to work with these command line utilities and what they can do for you. So in that exercise, you're going to do, I'm not going to have you derive the syntax yourself. I'm going to kind of tell you what to type. So you're going to do a lot of typing what you see, and then you're probably going to forget at least 50% of what that is, and that's okay. That's why there are documentation available for these utilities and books. A lot of us don't keep all this syntax in our head. You can always look it up, but you'll get some experience running some of these tools and see how they work. But you will leave 100% more familiar with Gdal and Ogr than you enter Tuesday's class. So I hope you enjoyed this lecture, and I will see you next Tuesday.